All of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
We're back just in time for the 6th series of Doctor Who, and the star of the show is complaining that he is terribly overworked. I suppose, yeah, I've got 3 other podcasts on the go, and this one, and I'm trying to write a book, and I've got a full-time job, so, you know, it's tricky. I'm Ian.
And I'm Mark, and welcome to Season 6 of All of Time and Space. We've got a fantastic guest lined up for this one, but before we get to that, let's find out where we are in the story. The Doctor remembers Dulcus from a previous visit as a civilised and peaceful place. But times have changed, and his second trip is not quite the holiday he was expecting. The Dulcians themselves are more reluctant than ever before to engage in acts of violence. The so-called Island of Death, once used as an atomic test site, has served as a dire warning to generations of Dulcians of the horrifying consequences of warfare. But an alien race prepares to take advantage of their pacifism. The whole planet and its passive inhabitants are threatened with complete annihilation, and no one, it seems, is going to lift a finger to stop the evil dominators and their unquestioning robot slaves. And we'll be back after this.
Oh, look, I think we'd better get back. Zora will be wondering what's happening.
Well, this is interesting, yes. Obviously an interstellar spaceship of considerably advanced design.
Oh, no, you're not thinking what I think you're thinking, are you?
That, I think, Jamie, depends on what you think I am thinking. Hey, Doctor! Stop. Doctor!
Jamie, don't do it!
Doctor, look! Oh, my word!
Next task. Shall we destroy? Shall we destroy?
And welcome back. And we're pleased to be joined by a returning guest. It's the wonderful Tim from the Missing Episodes podcast. Hello, Tim.
Hello, chaps.
Hello.
I'm not really a returning guest. I've not done a proper one before.
Well, we're popping your cherry now, so to speak.
And what a story to pop your cherry on.
You requested this one. We're going to dig into that. But first, Ian.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I don't know when you're listening to this podcast. Obviously, I'm not watching you all the time. Tim, it's time for the Mind Probe. You've heard the show. You know my preamble. Do I really need to try and dredge it up from my memory? Or shall I just say
Yes.
it's time? Oh, God. Satisfy the Mind Probe and you will be returned to your customary time and place. But if you fail in the challenge, my twisted, leering henchman here, Castellan Cockram, is frothing at the mouth to toss you vigorously, comedy turn of page, into the time lash. Tim, are you ready? It's time for the Mind Probe.
No, not the Mind Probe.
You are authorized to use the Mind Probe. One.
What? No, not the Mind Probe.
That was a good one.
Perfect.
I love that. The stress on the probe.
Yes.
You've got a very short sentence Jericho had to work with there. Wasn't sure which word to
Tim loves
stress.
a good probe.
Stressed all of them.
Yeah.
So the way the Mind Probe usually works is there are lots of interesting words in the titles of Doctor Who stories that I'm able to kind of riff on and go off on tangents.
Yeah, I can see
this
where
story,
this is going.
however, this one's called The Dominators. So I did get some links to websites that I'm not allowed to look at, because it's a work laptop and they have sensors. So these questions are, I'm really sorry, they're all about the Dominators.
Wow.
Okay, if you're ready, I will begin thusly. Notable for featuring the legendary Brian Cant. Is the Dominators. The Dominators it is. But what was Brian Cant's first Doctor Who story that he appeared in?
Well, I think it's Dalek's Master Plan. Potentially. I don't think he was in any others. I'll go with Dalek's Master Plan.
Correct.
Yes.
I don't want to spoil anything, but I think you're going to do okay here. Question 2. Who wrote the target novelisation of The Dominators?
Oh, I'm not sure. I want to say... My mind's eye has got lots of small writing. Ian Marter.
Is the right answer.
Hey.
He's 2 for 2.
I've never read it.
No, neither have I.
I was looking for it the other day because I had it when I was a kid, and I've got my very small collection of Target books knocking around. I couldn't find it anywhere. Maybe I've just thrown it in the bin. I don't know.
Listeners, stay tuned. We're going to get really upbeat any second
Yeah.
now as we look forward to talking about the Dominators. Question 3. A quarry in which British county doubled as the surface of Dulcis?
Well, it's pick a home county. I'm going to go with Kent.
He's correct again.
Oh, he knows his onions.
Okay, question 4.
I only guess that because I am in Kent.
Oh, whereabouts in Kent are you?
I'm in Canterbury.
I used to live in Canterbury.
Did
Whereabouts?
you?
Yeah, I lived there. I've lived there 3 times.
What's your full address, please, Tim?
Our listeners will be fascinated to know I am near Dane John Gardens.
Oh, how lovely! Yes, I was near there when I was at Christchurch.
Ah,
But I've lived literally all over Canterbury.
I think Mark
How
John
lovely.
from Diddley Dum lives in Canterbury as well.
he lives
gonna
nearby. Yeah.
I'm going to give you an extra point just for living in Canterbury. How is the... Oh, sorry. Question 4. How is the dolphin since it changed hands a couple of years ago?
Well, I used to go in the Dolphin when it was run by a Scottish Elvis impersonator who used to like to fight. And
Excellent.
I've been in there about 3 times since then, and it was okay. But I much preferred the drunk Scottish Elvis impersonator.
I mean, sure. Pete was a lovely man, but he lacked that kind of Grand Guignol kind of theatre. The real question 4. Arthur Cox played Cully. In which Matt Smith episode did he also appear?
This is the problem with me being on a game show. I'll have to say the answer I don't know, and I don't have interesting banter when I know. So I'm going to say the 11th hour. He's
Is the
pottering
right
around
answer.
the village, isn't he?
Yeah,
His
it's the right
moustache.
answer. Yeah. So, and here, imagine if you will, the bottom of the barrel. Imagine we've skated over that kind of oily meniscus at the top of the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do now is I'm going to plunge into the bottom of the barrel, into the actual wood, and we're going into the bottom of the barrel. If Unearthly Child was serial number 1, what serial number is the Dominators?
Oh, you pig. Right. I'm not going to count them, but
he is clearly counting.
Yeah. He's running out of fingers
Okay.
already.
This is a very dry way of doing it, I guess, but you can sort of do it with production codes-ish. But we don't have time for that here on All of Time and Space. I'm going to say number 47.
Is the wrong answer.
Oh.
It's number 44.
Oh. Close. So close.
So including your Canterbury point there, you've got a grand total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 out of. Well, let's say 5 out of 5. Well done, jolly well done.
Tim. No tinsely
Mark,
death for you.
There'll be no tossing after the show.
No.
But well.
Tim. I mean, it's one way to celebrate winning the quiz.
I'm humbled and honoured.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Tim.
I get to live.
Tim.
Oh.
Timothy. What in the ever-loving world of Jeff were you thinking when you suggested, please, can I have the Dominators?
I was having a discussion in a WhatsApp group with some people. Well, I wasn't going to be having a discussion in a WhatsApp group by myself.
What you do in your own time is up to you.
Well, you were booked up for a long time in advance.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I do have this weird habit of just booking people for years ahead.
And there was a question of whether I'd do the Web Planet, and I didn't. And the lady who did it was wonderful. So that's fantastic.
Did a great job.
And I'd done a podcast with someone else about the gunfighters. So I was in this sort of perhaps masochistic mood where I felt like I could tackle stories which weren't necessarily at the top of people's lists
Not
for Doctor Who
loved.
stories to watch. Correct. However, it was a jolly nice surprise when you reminded me of it a month ago. Or whenever it was, 3 weeks ago. But I mean, I think that's what was on my mind. I don't want to get into reviewing it yet, but I don't hate it.
Okay.
It's all right.
Oh, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Did you have the Target novel back in the day, or was that not one that you'd...
I had it.
Yeah.
I never read it.
Never read it.
I suppose I read about 2/3 of the ones I had.
Mm-hmm.
I once did at the end of the year in English at secondary school, we had to do a reading list of what we'd read the previous year, and that would go towards our report. And I took Doctor Who off all the titles and just gave the name of the stories. And my parents, who knew I didn't really read, came home and said, well, Mr. Winder thinks you're a voracious reader. What on earth are all these books? And so I probably hadn't read half of those, but I had it. I never read it. I got it from a flea market in Bolton called Bygone Days, and it just went in the unread pile. I'm afraid.
Oh dear! I remember it had quite a striking cover, or at least the version I had. The quarks looked towering.
That's right. There were two covers. They issued it with two covers. The original cover, in the early-ish 80s, I'd suggest, had a very blue palette.
Yeah.
And it had Ronald Allen.
Yes, that's the one I had.
Yeah.
Kind of purpley neon logo, if I remember rightly.
And then with the Virgin Blue Spine 1992-93 range, they did one with the Alistair Pearson cover, which is far better.
Well, Ian is our resident Doctor Who literature expert. Ian, did you have this book? Did you read it? Did you like it?
No, didn't have it, didn't read it. Probably picked it up in the school library at the age of 8, gave it a cursory inspection and thought, it looks quite boring.
How wrong you were, Ian. How wrong.
I actually wonder if I didn't read it because I acquired the book after the VHS came out. That's a possibility.
Yeah. That'll do it.
Because it was all early 90s for me, because I'm a young whippersnapper.
All right, no need to rub it
in. I think the VHS came out in maybe 91, 92, something like that. It was an early-ish Troughton.
I think this might be one of those stories where it would probably benefit from having read the Target book first. Because your mind possibly has a better conception of what fashion is like and
Maybe.
And what an alien world might consist of. Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe I'm being harsh.
I do know, again, another fascinating school story,
Mm.
that in 1993, my third year, I think, we had a year master called Dr. Holland. And Dr. Holland was a tall, thin chap, very erect. Let's get that word out of the way. And
let's not park it full time. The word is now knocking around. We'll return.
Yeah, it's in the atmosphere now, isn't it? Yeah. We've gone there. Yeah. And he was very, very proper and very posh. Oxbridge. He used to say, I went to an independent school, so it was quite posh. And he used to say grace in Latin, and he was terrifying. And we had this sort of show and tell thing one lesson, and I talked about Doctor Who. And I remember I said, I've got all of the BBC audio releases, and someone said, how many is that? And I said 2. And I showed the Mordrin Undead memory sequence, which all the class laughed at. So I was on my knees by that point. Yeah. I was really embarrassed. Yeah. Anyway, this Edwardian sort of pencil case, who was our English teacher, said, asked if I could stay behind at the end of the lesson.
Oh God, is this going to be a Operation Newtree story?
No,
oh, God.
No. And he said, I loved your little presentation, Tim. Do you happen to have the Doctor Who with the quarks?
Oh.
So I did, and I lent him the Dominators, and he had my back after that.
Wow.
Nice.
But of all the stories that he remembered,
that obviously left an impression on him.
The quarks. Yeah.
Do you want to know who really loves the Dominators?
Yes.
Fraser blooming Gregory. That boy. Fraser, if you're listening, I love you dearly, and you are a credit to the nation of Geordieland, but Christ on a bike. He's sent us about 500 tweets about how great the Dominators is.
It's not a democracy, Fraser. You can't stuff the ballots. It doesn't work.
That said, it might possibly be worth reading out one or two just to, keep us on a slightly more positive keel.
I think that should happen.
I've not said I'm going to be negative.
This is true. Ian and I have not revealed our hand yet, although, well. Anyway.
I think you have pretty much, Mark.
Okay, well, I'll drop a few of Fraser's comments in as we go. So Fraser says, how do I love thee, Dominators? Let me count the ways. First of all, I love the feel of this. It's one of the last great hurrahs of early 20th century sci-fi. All chrome spaceships and shining cities. Pure Flash Gordon. When do we get to see another actual flying saucer in Doctor Who? It's all rockets and spacecraft after this.
Well, the little rocket thing that goes from the island to Dulcus is very Flash Gordon.
Yes, I thought that. Very RKO. Yes.
Yeah.
I would like to probably suggest that the rockets in Flash Gordon were a little bit better than the ones in this. They had sparks coming out the back of them and everything.
They did. They went. Vroom.
They did. They sounded like some sort of hairdryer going. It was great.
Should we talk about Flash Gordon instead? I really liked, especially Flash Gordon's trip to Mars, where Ming's got this brilliant plan to destroy the Earth. I didn't see that coming.
No. Ming the Merciless.
I think I've exhausted my Flash.
There are flying saucers in the next few years, but okay, that's fair enough. It's nice to love things.
Anyway, that ends our conversation about the Dominators. Tim, it's been lovely to chat to you. And, please come back again in another couple of years.
Mark, let's have your story. What's your history with this serial? Did you have the book? Did you watch it in 1991 when it was on BSB?
I had the book, and I'm sure I would have watched it on UK Gold back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah, it's... I mean, it's got a great TARDIS team. Let's not forget that. We've got Troughton and Jamie and Zoe.
Jamie.
I mean, thank God they are in it, because they possibly saved this one for me, because otherwise I think we were talking possibly Celestial Toymaker levels of scoring. Ian?
See, I don't think it was that bad. I have things to say on both sides of the good bad divide.
Okay.
Or canyon.
All right.
Yeah, so let's not. It's no toy maker. Come on. The people have turned up to listen to the start of our new series. They don't want to be met with rampant negativity and sighing.
Yes,
and
that's right.
Sobbing and people
we're
going,
at the start of a brand new series. We have
Yeah.
this wonderful new time team. So you're going to start with a real big, standout kickstart of a first story. Oh no, we've got the Dominators.
Belter.
And this continues the trend of having stories that were recorded at the end of the previous season and held over to start the next season. And I think this time round it shows. Whereas I think like Tomb of the Cybermen last time it felt really filmic, and it felt like we'd taken a step forward in production values, whereas this doesn't for me. You may have other opinions. Opinions may vary. Tim, you were about to say something before I rudely cut you off.
No, I tried to rudely cut you off. I disagree. I think it feels quite fresh.
Okay.
Considering it was the penultimate story in the production block that was hell in terms of writing.
Yeah.
And they still had a story to go. And considering in stories, well, in a particular story, The Web of Fear, I think Troughton comes across as absolutely knackered. I think he's very serious. I think he's very flat, because he's just done the two-hander.
Yeah.
Before that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is only a few months later, and I think it has a freshness to it. Maybe that's a visual thing because it's all daylight and a lot of it is outdoors. I don't know. I think Troughton is fresh. I think Jamie is Jamie. Zoe is new, so isn't really in full Zoe boffin mode. But I think it feels quite fresh.
I think Troughton's fresh because he, as you quite rightly say, was knackered, and he had actually negotiated that he should not do so much in the way of pre-filming.
That's right.
So you'll notice there are scenes where the Doctor is out running across the barren landscape of Dulcus that does not look like some sort of tip they've gone to in Kent. And you can, sadly these days we're watching on bigger screens than we had back in the 60s.
I know, you couldn't tell on VHS, could you? You just couldn't tell on VHS. I was really surprised on the DVD to go, hang on, he's regenerated.
Who's that chap?
Yeah.
So yes.
But not to talk about the next story, do you feel the same way about the Mind Robber, Mark? Because that was the same production block.
Now, I haven't watched it for a long time, but I do have very fond memories of that one.
That will be interesting to see whether you think that's on its last legs then.
Now, I feel like this is almost heresy, but I feel like I'm not necessarily specifically about Troughton, which I think was Ian's issue last season, but I am starting to edge towards actually looking forward to the Pertwees. I never thought I'd hear myself say that. Well.
I'm a massive black and white Doctor Who fan, as my podcast may indicate. But I don't have a lot of time for the Troughton stories. I don't.
Okay.
I love Patrick Troughton. I'd watch him sleep, I would. I've got no choice now. But I will watch him in anything. I love his performance in everything he does. I like the fun. I like his comedy. I think he's a brilliant clown. And for that reason, I could watch him, mow the lawn, paint a wall, whatever. And therefore, I'm slightly perhaps immune to criticism of the Dominators because I feel like season 5 isn't up to much cop, to be honest. I think that's heretical, possibly to say. But
I don't know. I think that there is an argument that season 5 is very much the one-trick pony season, where there's, with one or two changes,
basically,
it's pretty much the same story repeated, but with a different location and monster.
That's right, and that's the same here, only without the monster. So
right,
you basically
hang on a minute. What about those fearsome quarks?
Well, but basically in season 5, you've got the Doctor, Jamie, and Victoria running around between sets in different combinations, and there's a monster, and then there'll be an ally in the mix. But basically, it's just about the monster, isn't it? I think there's no brilliant storytelling. There's no, the Hartnell era had carefully threaded plots. The plotting in Troughton, for me, is non-existent.
Yeah.
Well, the story, rather, is non-existent. The plotting is just moving the pieces around the sets.
It feels like these are... Because the old thing about the Daleks was they were kind of half designed to be replicated in the playground by people who weren't very creative. And these are the stories that you'd play in the playground. It's like literally run over there, run away from the monster, run back.
Well, the Quarks were very much meant to be the next in a very long line of creations that were thought to be perhaps the next big thing after the Daleks. And
wow. How did that turn out?
Quarkmania didn't really catch on, which is a shame.
Well, it had greater ramifications, didn't it? Because Haseman and Lincoln, fresh from their success from the two Yeti stories, wrote this one.
Yeah.
And they got dicked around.
I don't remember seeing their names on the credits.
Well, they got dicked around so much by Sherwin.
Yeah.
That they were already grumpy.
He's
and
a
then
funny
they tried...
character. I don't really get. I can't get a
he's
handle
very.
on him.
Yeah.
The other sort of showrunners, you get a bit of a general gist of what they're like, but
he just seems a bit whingy, doesn't he? In later days. But yeah, so then they tried to take the Quarks themselves to Terry Nation's merchandiser.
Yes.
And they all fell out.
Yes, because the BBC had already. Claimed them as their property, which went down like a lead balloon.
There was a dispute because they'd already made the serial by this point, and so that was threatened, and so they took their ball home, and they didn't do the third in the Yeti trilogy.
Yes, there was going to be the Laird of McCrimmon, wasn't there?
Yeah,
which was going to write out Jamie. But would that mean we wouldn't get the War Games? Frankly, rather have the War Games.
Yeah. So it's a bit prickly, and it's one of those scripts, funnily enough, like The Celestial Toymaker, that suffers from an original idea, which apparently was some sort of satire about pacifism. So you'd have these Dulcians, Senex, and the like sat round debating for longer.
Well, it was 1968, wasn't it? So we were talking the well into, probably out the other side now, flower power and... Yeah,
you've got flower power. You've got flower power being satirised by a generation who were probably cautioned by Chamberlain and, the appeasement of Germany. So you've got two sort of 20-odd year apart things. That kind of reflects in the plot, though, doesn't it? Because you've got Senex, who is Chamberlain, say. Yep. And then you've got Kando.
Yes. Can-do.
Who's can-do. She's got that can-do attitude.
She really has.
Who's a complete wet blanket of an attempt at writing a hippie character. So you've got both.
Although Fraser was rather taken with the actress, I've been led to believe from the extras.
You surprise me in no way.
I know.
If it had a pulse.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, I was worried for Cully because that dress he was wearing was quite revealing. I'm worried that Fraser might forget where he was. But anyway, carrying on.
Yeah. So you've got this. So one of the problems for me is you've had the satire taken out, which probably benefits it, but you've still got all that leaves is very dry people debating endlessly, very dry things.
There's a lot of old chaps
with no
sat
point.
around talking about stuff.
Yeah. And you know, that's one of the problems for me. There are lots of positives, but that's one of the problems.
Well, you could look at it and say that the quarks were there for the kids.
Yeah.
And all the chatting and the highly complex political allegory was there for the student adult population. So you could argue this story had something for everyone.
Indeed. You could.
Whether they wanted it or not is entirely a different matter. Yeah.
So yeah, but like the Celestial Toymaker, it doesn't do what it set out to do. So you've got the remnants of the pacifist stuff and the people and the procrastinators, and it's just not written with the same intent. It's like the second half of the Gunfighters for me, where Donald Cotton's kicked out and it stops being funny and starts being boring. Yeah. So it's always dangerous.
Very controversial.
It's always dangerous to mess.
The irony is, if they'd called this story The Procrastinators, it would probably still be on my shelf and I'd be intending to get around to it at some point.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Fraser goes on to say, the design of the quarks is iconic. It's lasted through the years and instantly recognisable. It's probably more burnt into our hive fan minds than any other monster outside the big three. Having the childish voices actually adds menace, and the thing that sounds cute becomes deadly, which is always chilling.
What are the big three?
Discuss. The big three.
I don't know.
You got your
Cybermen.
Daleks, your Cybermen. I suppose the Ice Warriors or
Sontarans,
Sea Devils.
The Absorbaloff.
It's a big. You've got big two, then you've got a sort of second division.
A big two. Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
I mean, I remember it being very striking from the Target novel cover. And I thought, oh wow, they look really cool. But as is the way with a lot of these things, they look rather wonderful in still images, and then you see the moving images, and perhaps not so much. I was very impressed that their arms, although they weren't able to sort of move up and down, they were still able to aim at people who were in a higher position than they were on cliff edges and things. Yeah.
Well, they'd lean back, you see.
So they can lean back with their bendy legs.
And the way you stop them is just to wrap a bit of bed linen around their ankles and then lie on top of them.
Ian and I have just leant back with our arms out, by the way.
And to be honest, I'm quite happy to wrap a bedsheet around my legs and lie back if anybody wants to.
I have heard that about you.
Get on top of me. So, I mean, yeah, let's look at the quarks. I mean, the realization of their physicality was not perfect, but it did the job. And they looked striking. They looked memorable. They could have been memorable. I think, and I'm not going to surprise anyone when I say I think the problem was the voice. And it was a great idea to have a youthful voice. You just needed to be able to hear what they were saying. That's the one tiny little thing I would have changed.
Yeah, that does. With the 60s, I suppose it's down to the technology they have at their disposal, but quite often they end up being... We found this with the Cybermen in numerous stories. You're really struggling to make out what they're saying.
Yeah. I like the design. I like the heads. I love that sort of
very cool,
Giant's Causeway sort of thing sticking out. I love all that. I think fundamentally they're flawed because there is some innate quality which makes you think they're cute. I'm not sure whether it's the voices. I'm not sure whether it's the knowledge that there's little kids inside. But they sort of inspire the same sort of feelings I have towards the Chumblies.
I was... Oh, mention the Chumblies. Oh, how I miss the Chumblies.
This is very much the Galaxy 4 of Season 6, isn't it?
Yes, it is, actually. That's a jolly good point. So, I think I watched John Kelly's seminal making of from 2010, and the actor who plays... Is it Teal? He said whenever they fell over, or got blown up or shot, you just felt sorry for them on set.
Yeah, it's true.
So if the actors are feeling sorry for them on set, I mean, you don't really stand a chance. There's just something about them which makes me like them too much. I love the Daleks, but because they're terrifying,
menacing, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and they're these little 4-foot things that are next to two tall actors who are being made to look taller. Yeah, I think they're a good idea. I like them. I like the idea that they're little droney things that have multi-functions, and I love all the sort of energy stuff. I like all that as an idea, but for me, they just fall flat.
Oh. Well, of course, they are acting at the behest of the Dominators from the title. What do we think of the Dominators? Ronald Allen's a bit of a legend, isn't he?
Well, he's one of the actors. I'm very good on actor spotting. I am.
Well done. Correct. He was one of the actors, yes.
So I'm good on actor spotting, but I didn't spot him. I never put him next to the guy in Ambassadors of Death who's playing this sort of laconic, slightly badly acted guy. And I think he's superb. I think he pulls off a grumpy bastard really, really well.
He's good. He's quite versatile because he plays the guy in Crossroads for many, many years. Then he plays the slightly dodgy uncle in Five Go Mad in Dorset, doesn't he, with the comic strip presents?
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Does he?
Oh,
I don't know
if you've
that.
not seen that, that's...
He was in Compact as well, apparently. But the Crossroads performance is more in the mould of Ambassadors of Death than...
Yes, I think, a bit less eyeliner, yeah.
I like them. I'm fine. I'm fine with them as I like the shoulder pads and
it's very
the
distinctive,
tortoise
isn't it?
shell. Yeah.
Looks a bit like someone's hollowed out a sofa and just sort of inserted them into it.
Yeah, and I like their what do you call it? Tassely sleeves.
Yeah.
I like that. I don't mind them as a concept.
Yeah.
Would you cosplay as a Dominator? It's all got very X-rated here. Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
With someone else, you'd bump into them. Yeah, with your big shoulder pads.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. But by the end of episode 1, they've bickered 3 times in every scene.
Yeah.
And by the end of episode 5...
gets a bit wearing.
It gets a bit wearing.
Yeah. Of course, it was going to be 6 episodes, and
well, that's right.
Another thing that
and
came from
the bickering is the bickering is the bit of the script from Haseman and Lincoln that they liked and felt were essential to the plot. So they kept that in and threw out everything else.
All right, I'll tell you what. You can keep this. You can have 5 episodes of these two bickering, or you can have the Colin Baker era. Ooh. Which would you rather have?
That's like saying, do you want to be kicked in the balls or punched in the balls?
I mean, the problem is there are 2 of them on this big ship they've got. They're going to have bickered presumably for the last 3 months of hyperdrive.
Yeah.
Then they land on the planet. They don't get on. It's only going one way.
Yeah.
What sort of HR department sends them out in teams of 2 when clearly they already don't get on? There's nothing there. I
think maybe they've just got this policy of sending married couples out as teams to do their bidding. So I think they're one of those couples that just bicker constantly, and then they have a lot of makeup time off camera.
So that's a new reading of the text. I'm not necessarily dismissing it out.
Now, quite how they manage it in those costumes, I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, let's not go down that.
I cast my eye over just very quickly, just before we recorded, the About Time study of this.
Oh yeah.
And they speculate, well, 1, what are Dominator women like? But 2,
maybe?
2, do they turn their women into quarks?
Oh, God.
That's a thought.
Yeah.
See, now I'm thinking because Pooja's quite short, I could get her to be my Quark.
Yeah,
I
my
could be
wife
a
is just about
Dominator.
5 foot, so yeah, I reckon she could
Yeah,
probably.
we could get them to, scrunch themselves up into a little
Yeah.
cardboard box and wave their arms around.
I'm sure they'd be
poorly.
well up for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I reckon she'd love that. I won't suggest it.
No,
She's very
I won't
violent.
either.
Yeah.
Which brought to mind the Toclophane, weirdly.
Okay, with the childlike voices. Yeah. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
And I can't really remember what the Toclophane looked like, but did they have pointy bits coming out of a sort of spherical?
They kind of like, yeah.
See, I was
flying
gonna,
balls.
Yeah, I was going to say, if RTD brought the Quarks back now, they'd be brilliant because they'd be able to do better things with the arms and the voices, and they'd be entirely.
Well, we're recording this in August of 2023, so we might yet find out.
We might.
Oh, do you think if they're not in the 60th, that's it. I quit.
Doctor Who's dead to me if they don't come back in the 60th.
Yeah. Had the writers gone on, they would have, as you say, written another Yeti story. Do you think in the back of their minds they were thinking of lots of future elaborate stories for the Quarks? I mean, were they tied to the Dominators, or could they have turned up with other people in other roles? Or
I might be imagining it. It's been so long since I've seen them, but didn't the comic books just have the Quarks on their own without the Dominators? I'm pretty sure they did.
Yeah, which caused arguments.
Yeah.
Not the fact that they weren't with the Dominators, but it added to the whole litigious atmosphere. Yeah. So I think they look good, but I just think there's a sort of innate quality that I can't quite put my finger on that undermines their credibility as a threat. But doesn't half look good when they shoot the lady in the first episode?
Oh yeah, that's an
and they do the
effect,
oil on water, like nuclear
the
burning
flames.
effect. Gosh.
Yeah, that was really good. I was impressed.
And the explosion of the little white dome thing is huge, and so
the Quark when it explodes and all that's left of its two little legs.
Yeah.
Up. Yeah.
There's some nicely done stuff around them, but they could be Chumblies.
They could.
If only.
Oh, it's nice to have Zoe on board, though, isn't it? Because as much as we love Victoria,
did we?
She was somewhat one note, whereas I feel like we have a slightly more rounded character from Zoe Herriot. Which we'll see even more in the next story, but let's not jump ahead too far.
Yeah.
Thoughts on Zoe, Tim? Are you a fan?
I am a fan. Yes, because I can't stand Victoria, and so having someone who doesn't pointlessly wander off and screams all the time is a really refreshing break. And I think she complements Jamie very well.
Yeah, it's a nice
she doesn't have a great deal to do in this,
no.
but I do enjoy Zoe more, and I really enjoy listening to what's the actress called? Sorry,
Wendy Padbury.
Wendy Padbury talk about Zoe and her interviews. I find she's a deeply witty person. So yeah, no, I really enjoy Zoe. I really enjoy season 6.
Good.
Largely because of Zoe, I think.
Yeah.
It feels like they've really found their feet with a trio of companions there. She's not. Perhaps lacking a bit of humour, but you don't need much when you've got.
Yeah, the other two kind of make up for that, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about Zoe is that she does provide. Because with Victoria, you had these two companions who were both from the past, and it kind of pulled the show one way. And having Zoe, who's kind of, obviously she's supposed to be from the future, but she's contemporary, she's intelligent, she's serious. She does add a different flavour to the trio's adventures, and it's a really welcome change. I don't know that Victoria, if she'd stuck around for this one, and they'd said to her, right, can you scream at that quark? I imagine she'd have just gone fuck it.
Yeah. Zoe provides opportunities in stories for her to use her skills and her gifts and her character, whereas Victoria didn't, apart from they literally used her screaming. You know, that was her innate quality, a screamer. So, you know, they use that, whereas Zoe gets lots of things to do. You know, with a comic book hero from when she was a child, and then she masterminds the destruction of the cyber fleet in the invasion, and you know there's all that stuff about computers, and then there's the Crotons. She's much more useful. Yeah. She's much more useful to the writers than bless her Victoria was.
Yeah. Ian, are you still losing favour with Patrick Troughton, or are you back on board again?
Well, this was a much more, and I don't know if it's because he was exhausted or if he just had, because it does feel like a slightly different kind of story. But he wasn't as tiresome because he wasn't flitting between his kind of two states of sort of impish deviousness and panicking. And because there was none of that Troughton panicking, I found it a lot less grating. I mean, obviously, I love the guy, and I think he was very good in the first episode of Inspector Morse, and many Doctor Who's.
That wasn't he? He was a bit.
They made Patrick Troughton play some sort of dirty old sex man.
Deviant,
yeah. Big stretch. But yeah, but he what? No, I was just having a big stretch.
Okay.
He was where you want the Doctor to be, I think, in this, because a lot of the times when he's you think you're acting like a 12-year-old, and you're supposed to be a Time Lord, and you're supposed to be, you know, a bit clever.
Do you think
and
he over-eggs it a bit
superior.
in the playing dumb where they're being tested, or is that? Do you find that? Fun?
That works for me. That's fine, because that's, you know, he's got to get that subterfuge across to the kids watching the show, and you can't be too subtle. But at the same time, you can't just be too hilariously panicky all the time. So I still, you know, he still has sort of slightly more modes of being than certain other Doctors who are always very much in the same emotional place. And I think, and I didn't realise this was produced in the middle of a block. I assumed this was like, you know, first day back at school. And he just, I liked where he is in this one, and I like the way he plays it.
Yeah, as I said before, I think that trio are the best thing about it. You know, even if the story can be a tad middling, they are able to rescue it. Moving back to this specific story, we have a handsome young hero who teams up with the TARDIS trio. Ian's looking around in complete disbelief. I am, of course, talking about Cully.
Oh, Christ. I thought, was there a character I'd forgotten about?
Yeah. Thoughts?
I'm wary of going first because I quite like him.
Well, in that case, you should.
Yeah,
you should
go for it.
Well, he's quite interesting in that, you know, he's this fantasist, and he's not really. It's the boy who cried wolf, isn't it? And you know, he runs around when his leg's not broken.
He's a rebel that goes joyriding in that vehicle when he's not supposed to.
And that's right. But
crazy kid.
And you know, appearances aside, in those bloody costumes. And perhaps you see his loincloth a few too many times. For my taste. I think he's fine as an individual, but the problem with the Dulcians is that you've got Cully the rebel.
Yeah.
You've got those joyriders with him at the start. They seem to be of the same world.
Yeah.
But then you've got the research team.
Yeah.
Who are the wettest blankets that is possible to conceive.
It's just a bunch of old white men, isn't it? It's just,
Well, plus plus you've got the what's she called, Candu.
Yeah.
Balan and Candu. They're wet blankets. They're completely thick. They're supposed to be scientists. They're not. They are naive.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to tell me you're from another world, then I accept that because it is a fact. What? What? You're a scientist. And then you've got the old white guys in the capital who are hopeless. So anyway, I might have derailed the rest of your conversational points, but my point is that I like Cully because he's more interesting, but it doesn't make sense to me that he's of the same society.
He's very much the black sheep of the family, isn't he?
And speaking of black, was this the first upskirt in Doctor Who?
Gosh.
But you'll just need to have a moment now.
It's time to give out your Twitter address, Mark.
Yeah, it's Doctor Who Podcasters, DR Who Podcasters.
There you go, right in. Was this the first upskirt?
Yeah. I think Cully was kind of playing the kind of, Terry Thomas, wide boy, kind of cheeky chappy character, but within the parameters of everyone else having the emotional intensity of some yogurt, he at least cranked his performance up to like 0.5 and thus stood out as the kind of, I don't want to use the word spunky, but he was the most engaged of a fairly feeble lettuce-like characters.
Yes. What about you, Mark? What do you think of Cully?
I think, well, certainly I echo your sentiments that he's the most interesting of the Dulcians, but then I believe we're starting at a relatively low point. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that perhaps sometimes when you come into watching these stories that it can be that you're just not maybe in the right frame of mind to enjoy it. So maybe it's my problem rather than a problem with the story. I did sit down and watch this all in one go, whereas it probably might have paid just to space it out a bit and have a more episodic approach.
Yeah, this does feel like one of those stories that would benefit from protracted viewing. So, costumes.
We've got to get onto it. Jeebus.
What?
I mean,
oh my lord.
There couldn't have been a window in the entire of BBC Television Centre that had any curtains on it. They must have nabbed the lot.
So, going for this kind of Holy Roman Empire toga thing, maybe. But this whole padded corset thing on everyone,
weird,
what? I don't know what the designer was going for.
On the making of, Tim will probably remember this, Brian Cant apparently walked into the dressing rooms and got to see his costume for the first time. They're like, yeah, you're wearing that dress, Brian. He's like, no, that can't be my costume. He's like, yep, you are.
I like a toga.
Do you? I mean,
I like a toga.
I'm not entirely surprised, Tim.
Some of my so-called friends say I will only enjoy a Doctor Who if it has people in togas in it.
Okay.
But togas, these are not. They're hot togas. They're.
I mean, I'm not judging you, Tim. If that's what you enjoy,
I don't
that's
mind
great.
I don't mind a toga or a man in a kilt, or I'm at one with all of that sort of stuff.
He's good with legs.
It doesn't bother me one iota.
Yeah.
But these costumes do, and I can't
They're not
quite
the most flattering,
work
are
out
they?
why.
Poor Cully. I mean, the poor sod. His was particularly. I mean, fine if they've got to have these dresses. At least when he's got to be going up and down sand dunes and stuff, give him something to cover his modesty. Jeez. But then
there's
that
also,
said, I suppose, he's there getting a taste of what the women have had to put up with for the last God knows how many years.
There's also the sort of practical problem where he's coming down the ladder in the final episode, and the Doctor's trying to help him down the ladder, and I think Troughton accidentally sticks his hand up where he doesn't want to stick it, and has to sort of try and remove his hand without drawing attention to what's happening, because obviously they can't go for a retake. So there was just no real conversation between the costume designer and the director as to, could we not have such a flappy skirt? Although maybe Troughton was up for it, I don't know.
You suspect he was, don't you?
No comment. Yes.
In the sorry to jump about, but in the tunneling scene, did you enjoy the number 9 pill?
Oh,
thing?
yeah.
Oh, that was
ad-lib.
Marvellous.
Yeah. Laxative.
Yeah, so for those not in the know, a number 9 pill in the forces is a code for taking a laxative pill. And Troughton wanted to drop that particular nugget in. Oh, I'm not sure nugget was the right word to use in context, but anyway.
Anything
Pill in, nuggets out. That's the way that works.
Yeah. Getting back to Fraser Gregory. Jesus, how many more of these have we got? Fraser says, Zoe and the Doctor figuring out the Dominator's plan in their ship shows what a new and fresh dynamic she brings. Pat seems to thrive on having an intellectual equal for his Doctor to bounce off. But Troughton and Hines are always the ultimate pairing as they excel in this story, with so many scenes of them together clowning around, holding hands and ankles at one point. Jamie and the Doctor fooling the Dominators into thinking they're thick is endlessly rewatchable, hilarious and a real high point of this era. I did like the point where he turns around to Jamie and says, we might have to try and pretend to be thick. Do you think you can manage that, Jamie?
I liked all that.
Yeah,
I liked all that stuff.
Yeah.
I agree with that, I think, broadly. It's much needed scripted humour in apart from Troughton being a clownish character. It's the only scripted sort of humorous stuff in there. So I think that's why episode 2 works, because of all that stuff. I agree.
Yeah. And I think he was feeling that this was a better story for Jamie rather than just being the muscle. He actually had a lot more to do in this story, which I think is a fair point.
Yeah.
Much as I hate to agree with Fraser, he's correct.
Yeah.
Were there any particular high points for you, Tim, that really made this a standout for you?
Yes.
Excellent.
One thing I love about the end of season 5 going into the start of season 6 is the continuity, the efforts they go to from story to story.
Yeah.
So you go from the Wheel in Space to a rerun of The Evil of the Daleks.
Yes.
Love that. To fill the summer break, and then they go into the Dominators, and then the end of the Dominators with the lava goes directly into the Mind Robber. Now, I know that's a victim of I know that is born out of the scripting problems that they have, but I really loved that.
Well, it goes back to the early days, doesn't it? They had those sort of continuing cliffhangers from one story to the next. It just felt one continuous serial. And I agree with what you were saying just now. When he steps out of the TARDIS, the Doctor's talking about feeling a bit exhausted because he's just spent so long recounting his memories from the evil of the Daleks.
And that shows that there is a great deal of thought going in, because they could have just banged out a repeat, couldn't they? But to incorporate it into the plot, I think that was good. I like lots of aspects of the design on this. Barry Newbury wasn't fond of his work on it, and it's his first story in years. But I really quite like it. I think the museum looks great. I think those ruins look good. Okay, it's studio bound, but I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
That museum there's a long list of props in there that you can spot from other stories. By the way, there's like the Gravitron.
Their props, don't they?
Yeah, the Gravitron is very the central bit of the Gravitron. The receiver in the middle of the dish is clear, but there's all sorts of bits and bobs in there. The dummies, I think that's really horrific. And I like the stings that they use throughout as well. The radiophonic noises work quite well because there's no music. I like the outdoor stuff. I think it's shot reasonably well. I think Barry is a competent guy outdoors, obviously. The touchless controls, that's quite Star Trek Next Generation. That's quite quite innovative. There's an amazing glass shot.
Yes, that
not
was
to get
cool.
too technical.
Yeah, no, it was.
But looking over the shoulder of Jamie and the Doctor, looking up at the Dominator's ship.
Yeah,
I like the interior of the Dominator's ship. I like the look of the Dominators. I love Ronald Allen in it. I love the running around and blowing up quarks and the alarms going off. I love that denouement. There's lots to enjoy.
Yeah.
It's just dragged down, underpinned by lots of things which annoy me.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? It's got potential, but it's just, I was going to say I don't think it's ever going to be regarded as an all-time classic, but there are people who patently love it.
Fraser Gregory.
As we will hear. Well, and he's not the only one. There are lots of people in the feedback who have said how much they enjoy it.
There are more of them. Good Lord.
I know.
I'd like to just skip right on to the end of the story.
Okay.
Because one of the most interesting things for me was once the Doctor has got the, whatever it's supposed to be, let's just call it a bomb.
Yeah.
And he's got to get rid of it. At no point does it occur to him to do anything else with it than stick it back in the bandit ship as they take off and murder them.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
He's a devious bastard, isn't he?
He's half the time the Doctor's all, do I have the right? And the rest of the time he's a homicidal time-travelling maniac.
That's the worst
Tom Baker
impression I have ever seen.
Yes.
Tom Baker
I wasn't going to do him
said,
justice.
Yeah, Tom Baker said, do I have the right? And then a few seasons later, he's lobbing bombs over his shoulder at the baddies and killing them off.
It's like the Doctor's moral code is very much something that the writers can sacrifice
from story to story,
if they have
on the
to.
needs of the story. Yes, very much so. Very much so. And I'm all here for that. That's fine.
I like the ending. I'm fine with it. I think it's fun.
Okay.
Hey, you've got to have a big explosion, haven't you? And the baddies have got to have their comeuppance.
They get their comeuppance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I mean, I'm not saying for a second that I would have done any different. I probably would have, worn jeans instead of some of those dresses. But apart from that, I'd have been blowing them up left, right, and centre. Even though I quite like the Dominators, two colleagues who don't get on. We can relate to that.
I don't think it's far off being good.
Yeah,
very good. I just think because I kind of like the condensed episodes 5 and 6. I think that's action packed. I'm perfectly happy with the tunnel. Love all that, catching the bomb. That's lovely, practical fun.
Yeah.
Episode 1 is fine. Episode 2 has them being captured stuff. But there's just swathes of stuff in between the good bits.
It kind of sags a bit, doesn't it, in the middle?
It just keeps bringing it back to, they're arguing again. They're arguing again. They're debating again. They're arguing again.
It's probably not helped by the fact that we've got a slightly tamer version of the same sort of thing when Cully gets back to civilization with Zoe, and then they have to go through the whole thing. Oh, so these were your friends that you were taking off on your road trip? No, I've just met them. Oh, don't tell me that. These were your friends. No, they've come in a spaceship. No. Yeah,
it kind of feels like it's got lots of tropey bits in there, or seminal bits in there. Like, it's a bit of a rerun of the Daleks. It's a bit, the Serial B, the Daleks.
Yeah.
It's a bit. There's bits of like the Sontaran story in there, because there's just two there from a big fleet that's in orbit. It kind of feels like a run-of-the-mill Troughton in areas, but it's all pasted together in this annoying context. So it feels like a carry-on film, but like a highlights reel of carry-on films with annoying bits in between, where you've got Barbara Windsor and Kenneth Williams being annoying at each other, and then you get to the bits that you kind of are there to watch. No one's ever compared the Dominators to carry-on highlights reel, but that's how it feels.
Well, can I
Kenneth Williams been in this, I'd have been much more. Now blow them up.
Infamy. Well, can I just tell you about the things that Fraser Gregory hates about this story? I know, controversial. I positively hate the flack that Maurice Barry gets for his direction of this story. Yes, there are more dynamic directors working on Doctor Who at this time, but he's achieving a lot more through a lot more subtle means than he's given credit for. Watch again and look at his location work. His tracking shots and how he uses angles. See how Rhaego is shot from below and Senex from above to suggest one towering over the other. It's subtle, but it's effective. And I hate how this story has become the whipping boy of the Troughton era, when it clearly has so much to offer. In summary then, a fantastic story with the TARDIS team firing on all cylinders and being nothing less than joy to watch, saving a well thought out and realised planet from a bunch of equally developed bullies. 10 out of 10. And now you've read that out, it officially counts towards the final season ratings. Oh, and one last thing, if you haven't said something nice about this story by now, you have 1 week to do so before I climb out of your TV backwards with the 5-hour version of this thread. You have been warned. Yeah, thanks, Fraser.
I don't really have anything to say about the direction. I mean, a wiser man than me once said, when you're looking at 60s Who, you're basically judging direction between Richard Martin and Douglas Camfield, and everybody else falls in the middle. There's the odd boom shot, there's the odd this and that, but it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, he's done good work previously. I think he does a great job on Tomb of the Cybermen.
Yeah, I think he's just got a bad rep, hasn't he? There's a bit of a martinet and a bit of a pompous so-and-so conducting the rehearsals from his music stand.
He's from a different vintage.
Yeah. Pops up in Day of the Triffids.
Yes, because he was an actor as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. As a blind
director.
as a blind scavenger who's clawing at the car. But not a blind director, no.
Shame that would have been.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to criticise on the direction. I think the outdoor stuff is all great. I think there's some good whiz-bangs in there. But ultimately, it's just a small cast of characters going off in different combinations around 3 locations. I mean, for 5 episodes with lots of bickering.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
If there is one.
Do we have anything else we want to get off our chest before we rank it? Well,
I used to really enjoy it as a teenager, as a young kid. I used to enjoy it a lot, and I think it's very easy when you're reviewing something for the purposes of a podcast to hone in on a particular lens through something to watch, and it doesn't stand up as a drama for 3 guys in their early 30s to view. It's a kids show, and it's got little robots, and it's got some threats, and it's got some clowning, so it's fine. It's not as bad. It's no worse than much of the rest of the era for me.
I think, apart from the odd one or two real duffers, there's something to like in all the stories. You know, you're probably going to enjoy some more than others, but I certainly don't hate this one, but it just felt a bit flat as a season opener for me. So, it's time for us to rate this story. And I'm going to come to Tim first. Tim, what would you like to give this story out of 10?
I'm going to give it a 6.
Okay. So it's above
That's
average.
where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. Ian.
I'm also going to give it a 6 because, you know, it's not the toy maker. It's not terrible. I think the main shortcoming with it is in the context of it being the season opener, and it maybe lacks some energy or some slightly more explosive nature. It was an interesting story. It felt very different from what's kind of immediately around it.
Yeah.
In many ways, it felt like a throwback to the Hartnell era. There was a nice allegory going on. There was thoughtful, real-world stuff being looked at. So, yeah, I think it was really strong. It was just ultimately not as exciting as it could have been, and that's probably my inner 8-year-old talking. So, yeah, 6 from me.
Okay. I am going to say it kind of falls right in the middle for me, so I'm going to give it a 5. Don't actively hate it, but it's not one that I would often
5's
pick
not
off.
bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick it off the shelf and go,
there you
really
go.
need to watch The Dominators, but on the other hand, it's not one that, you know, brings me out in hives at the thought of watching it again or anything like that.
You could have fooled me. I was expecting a 2.
Oh no, we reserve those for really special stories. I don't know. I think we're fairly positive on this show, but
you are.
But I tend to save my 10s for ones that really rock my world, and this one wasn't quite that for me. So we've had our say. Let's hear what you guys have to say about The Dominators.
I've got mail.
Okay, so let's crack on with what you guys think about this story. And first up from me is the lovely Richard Smith from Something Who. Hello, Richard. He has this to say. I'd love to love it, but really feels very half-hearted. It's the worst Haseman and Lincoln script by a mile. The cast seem embarrassed by it, and the Dominators seem to spend several episodes mostly shouting and going around in circles. Quarks are a bit of light relief, though. Thank you, Richard. And coming up next, we have heard from Philip Edney from the Sirens of Audio podcast. We get all the best podcasters listening to us. Philip says, this story is the perfect example that ultimately everything rises or falls because of the script. Troughton, Hines and Padbury give funny, thoughtful performances and manage to raise the material far above what they have. The location work is great, the models and sets are terrific, and costumes are interesting, but ultimately you can get past the fact that the authors have nothing to say, or even worse, that what they have to say is a warped and biased view of a group in their society they don't like. Great cliffhanger though. Thank you, Philip. Our dear friend Jim Cameron from the Crinoid podcast has got in touch to say, some excellent location filming. That's all I've got. Sorry. Thanks, Jim. Always very succinct. And someone else who's very straight to the point is our dear mate Anthony Carroll. And Anthony says, easy review, dull, 4 out of 10. He's not pulling his punches. It's because it's not a missing story, that's what it is. He's obsessed with the missing episodes. As Tim will probably well know. I'm sure if it was all recons, he'd be loving it. Thank you, Anthony, though. And next up, we've heard from Kieran at KJEvans2 on Twitter. And Kieran says, thank goodness they gave an episode away. Shame they couldn't have given another one away while they were at it. There's some interesting bits in there, but not a lot. Yeah, well, I think he's not alone on that. And our next correspondent is Paul Quinn. Hello, Paul. Paul says Haseman and Lincoln were only ever middling writers whose scripts needed a good director, designer, and cast giving it everything. It mostly comes crashing down in this one. Oh dear, they're all coming out on the negative side, unfortunately. Next up, we've heard from 42 to Doomsday, all the way down in Australia. And they say, it exists as a good cure for insomnia. Winky face. Yes, well, harsh but fair.
Hi, Mark.
Hello, Mark. Hope you're well. And lastly from me is the rather aptly named Grumpy Git. Grumpy Git 2021. Patrick Troughton was my first Doctor, so absolutely adore his era, except for this one, Dreadfully Dull Fare.
I thought the Dreadfully Dull Fare was going to be the first story in season 23 until they had to scrap it and do the trial thing.
Yeah, Big Finish did an adaptation though. That was
Yeah.
So before we go over to Ian, we're gonna have some audio from our good mate Andy Moore.
Have the rooms been completely booked for this weekend?
Some of them, but we need many more guests.
Of course. That is why we are here.
With respect, Navigator Argo, I still consider we should have opened a motel in America rather than the Midlands of England.
I decided otherwise, Probationer Toba.
But the Midlands have never been fully surveyed.
It's suitable for our purpose, and there is an intelligent form of life that we could utilize for the workforce.
But the natives have taken to wearing our shower curtains as clothing.
They have? Well, if necessary, we should destroy them.
Yes, destroy them.
But only if necessary. Now, a space cruiser is blocking access to the ring road. Commence work on moving it.
Command accepted. Shall I order the Quarks to carry it out?
Yes.
Quarks!
Well, I think that went very well, don't you? I loved what you did with the destroy them line.
Oh, thank you, love. But you're too kind. You're too kind. We're still alive.
Are we? I'm sorry, that's entirely my fault.
Oh, no.
Well, gentlemen, it's another comedy classic. What do you think, Tim?
I think that was brilliant.
Yeah.
That was a ton of work, and more importantly, the Crossroads music is welcome.
Oh
any time
yeah,
of
it's
day
a classic
or
tune,
night.
isn't it? Oh,
It is.
Love it. Ian, you have several missives.
Andy, if you're listening and you want to be on the Electric Sodcast, let me know. I have a ton of stuff. I'm not going to hang about like you. Bad Wilf. I'm guessing these are all from Twitter. I'm not here to tell people where these people are from. Bad Wilf from Twitter, I guess, says the costume designer had a fetish, with which I would agree. Someone, Tim Missing Episodes podcast.
Ooh.
It's the sort of story that needs a real expert to analyse.
Oh yeah.
It's a shame to let this Tim guy down, isn't it? Feel bad about that. Jonathan says, quite dull. Even Uncle Quentin can't save this story. The final Troughton year was very hit and miss, unfortunately. My friend Jason at Doctor Who Novels says, I can't even imagine what would have happened in episode 6. Just the same dull arguments happening on 6 different sets at once every week for 5 weeks. It even ruins Inferno by sharing the same volcano stock footage. I didn't know that, but yeah, guilt by association there. Dave Rennie says the best thing about this story is the Quarks, who deserved a return on TV. Best we got was them terrorising inside the 4th Doctor's brain in Destiny of the Doctors. The regulars have the usual magic. Ronald Allen is suitably grim as the villain. Not the best Troughton, though. I don't know. I think of the three main Troughtons, Patrick, Michael, and David, I'd take Patrick, but that's just me.
Quick point of order.
Yeah.
A Quark is in the War Games.
Well,
yes.
there you go.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah. Andrew T, because I can't. Unfortunately, the rest of his amusing name has been cut off there. Says, I might be annoying Sandman Jazz here, but much like Galaxy 4, this serial leaves huge potential just flapping loose. The interplay with the two Dominators is great. Both are wrong in their outlook, and that's their ultimate downfall. They're as inflexible as the Dulcians. The story has a lot of complex things to say about pacifism and its failings versus militarism and its failings. Unfortunately, when it's saying those things, it mumbles a fair bit. I've wanted to see more of the Dominators since I saw this series, and I wanted to see the fallout for the Dulcians too. Big Finish could get at least 4 epic series on them.
Only 4?
I'd listen the hell out of that. So there you go, Big Finish. You've even got a listener for this one. A society that was wholly pacifist and thought they were alone in the universe, who met the Dominators. What happens next, damn it? What happens next? Pete Fagan says, thesis, ineffectual Dulcians. Antithesis, reckless Dominators. Synthesis, kilted Piper, battle up top, party below. Michael Storm at Sandman Jazz says the Dominators starts off with a rather old man shouts at cloud reaction to the hippie peace movement idea of the late 1960s, but this never reaches the screen as the more aptly named Dulcians seem more like the residents of a posh retirement home and are rather one note. Equally, the titular Dominators are similarly, I can't even talk now. They are similar. One note. And Toba in particular comes across as a shouty YouTube man talking up a load of bollocks. As such, the story rapidly dissolves into a pedestrian bullies versus the underdog story with unlikable underdogs. The flat direction from Morris Barry, unflattering costumes, and out-of-the-playbox quarks make the story have the look and tone of a fan-made home video story about trying and failing to be ironic. The saving grace of the story is Fraser Hines, who is on fire throughout. Whether it be bouncing off Troughton and Padbury, stalling against the Dominators, or kicking some life into the character of Cully during their two-hander scenes, Fraser Hines is without a doubt the star of the show. Simon says, unlike Rhaego and Toba, I'm going to stick my neck out here, for ting, and say that it's great hangover who, but not so great to watch when you have a critical eye or want your brain vaguely stimulated. Jeremy Duncan says the anti-pacifist subtext is incredibly jarring and doesn't suit Doctor Who at all. Andy Parker, I had this story on video back in the early 90s at the tender age of 9 or 10 when I was first getting into Doctor Who. I enjoyed it as a fun runaround story and the Quarks were great to me as a kid. So some sort of personal relationship there. I mean, that's biased. As I grew older, I did start to find it dragged a bit, sadly. I bought it on DVD I bought it on DVD in 2010, and it was enjoyable to watch again after so long. However, it seemed a bit more somber in its tone. I found out later that censor clips of characters being killed or punished had been added, that were missing from the original video release. Here endeth the lesson.
Thank you, Ian. I've just realised I've got some even more feedback before we head over to Tim. Over on Mastodon, we've heard from David Moss. David is very snappy in his feedback. He says, take that, hippies. Pacifism is bad. Thank you. Anthony Carroll, the other Anthony Carroll, there are 2 of them. We love them both equally. Says, the 2 Dominators have an interesting relationship at least. If only the Dulcians had that by not killing off the youthful, adventurous characters in the first 10 minutes. We could have had an exploration of the generational divide and balance of pacifism versus warfare properly. At least Zoe has some solid work in leading a revolt. Victoria would have fainted at the thought. He also has this to say, weakest season opener so far. At least Galaxy 4's only 4 episodes. The middle episodes are the same guff regurgitated each week. Old Dulcians living up to their names with tired debates, and some mild threat come from the Dominators vaguely shaking their fists. Yes, it's all starting to sound rather familiar. Paul P. Waring on Mastodon says, unfairly maligned by many fans, but it's one of my favourite feel-good stories. Yes, the Quarks are cute rather than frightening, and the Dominators argue like an old married couple. But the regulars are on top form. I love how the Doctor jokes about Jamie pretending to act stupid, and how the plan for getting the seed device is so simple, only he could have thought of it. The chemistry is great. You can still see this if you go to a convention with Fraser and Wendy on a panel. Well, that's far more positive, thank you. And lastly, from me, we've heard from the legend that is David Kitchen. G'day, David. David says, the first official VHS I ever got, bought on a visit to the UK in 1991, and at that age I thought the Quarks were wonderful. There's some nice design work and good use of the location filming, but that's about all. Whereas the Daleks offers an excellent debate about the dangers of absolute pacifism in a neat 5-minute scene, the Dominators does the same debate badly and takes 5 episodes to do it. Cully should be an impetuous youth, but is instead played by a bored, middle-aged government chauffeur. The Dulcians start as a principled pacifists. Oh dear, yeah, he's not wrong. The Dulcians start as principled pacifists, but devolve to the point they're so useless one risks his life because the Dominators didn't make an appointment. By part 3, I'm rooting for the Dominators to wipe them out. A rare Troughton misfire. Oh, David, don't hold back. Just say what you think, mate. No, that's great. Thank you.
He did actually play the chauffeur in Yes, Minister.
Yeah, maybe
that's what he's saying.
He loves his political stuff, does our David. Tim, you have quite a number of tweets as well. Who have you heard from?
I do. The Paradise of Jeff. I rather like the Dominators, a bickering married couple, and their boxy kids bring war to a pacifist planet, sort of. What's not to love? And he's provided a little cartoon of a quark saying quark life.
He's very artistic, is our Jeff.
A bit like Blur, love it. Adrian Berry. I think the first time I saw quark would have been the Weetabix cutouts. Oh,
yes, that's
just before my time, I'm afraid.
Proper nostalgia, that is. Oh.
Matt Lee Newby. At uni, I used to put the VHS on when I couldn't sleep, and I rarely got past the first episode. More recently, I've come to appreciate its themes and ideas, and the city backdrop in the council meeting is actually really stunning. The costumes are awful, though.
True.
Bernard, underrated, enjoyable. Thank you, Bernard. Lucy McCall. I love it. I like the 1950s rocket science fiction aesthetic, the idea of a society that has developed into a series of passive-aggressive meetings, and I really like the Quarks. The dynamic between the two Dominators is brilliant, and there is plenty for Jamie to do, buzzing rocks at the Quarks. The shower curtain clothes are a bit much, perhaps, but they do at least look alien.
They certainly do.
Tony Cross, I like it. It's not a brilliant story, but it's fun. I used to think it was the worst Doctor Who story ever, but on a recent rewatch, I decided the fun wins out. Plus, Troughton adds value to every story.
He does.
Cliff Chapman, hello Cliff. Pat, Fraser, and Wendy keep it watchable, charming as ever, and the two Dominators are quite funny bitching. The Quarks are cute and fun, but it's a bizarrely mean-spirited, right-wing, anti-young people story with middle-aged people playing young people and vastly inferior to the Web of Fear from Hazen and Lincoln. Troy Ryan Wood, hello Troy. Don't understand the hate this one gets. It's got that perfect mix of serious and silly that represents the best of the Troughton era, and the Dominators are my favourite type of D-list villains who would clearly get their asses beat by any planet that wasn't a bunch of pacifists. As for the Dulcians, this isn't the first pacifist culture the Doctor has encountered, but I like the way this one is handled. Their culture basically nuked themselves once and was so horrified they did a full 180 and decided to settle everything through Socratic debate. And there's none of that Terry Nation / Star Trek, we just have to make them mad enough that they remember how to fight bullshit. They destroyed all the weapons centuries earlier, so when the topic of armed rebellion is raised, they come to the logical conclusion, we are totally effed. Clearly, though, this story only works in this one setting. I think there are only 8 quarks shown assigned to the ship, and their primary weakness is rocks and falling over. So basically, anyone with Ewoks level technology could easily take them. A true Doctor Who fan. While the Dominators argue like a couple in Archaea for 5 whole episodes and the Quarks aren't threatening, I think it's saved, as many serials are, by the regulars. The comedy between Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines is a joy, and it's nice to see Zoe's intelligence used as well. Yes. Christopher Clark. It's my guilty pleasure watch. I love it. The banter between Pat and Fraser is top notch. The Dominators are like a bickering old couple. It's so silly, it's terrific. David H. Those early stories trying to do new things, hampered by budgets, emboldened by sheer joy. The Quarks were so close to working. The Dominators' costumes were terrible. The story was bonkers. I loved it. Sadako 24. I quite enjoy it, actually. And last but not least, Doctors in Space. Loved the Quarks. The pacifists who just debated was an interesting concept. Dominator clothes, and then he's done that smug smiley face with 3 hearts around it, showing smug love. Loved Troughton, but felt he overdid the comedy on this occasion. There you go.
Well, thank you all very much for your feedback. If you'd like to get in touch on a future story, all the ways and means are listed over our end credits. But before we say goodbye to Tim, we are going to do some recommendations. Ian, would you like to get us started?
So I'm going to mention that I'm quite enjoying the new Guns N' Roses single, perhaps, and I'm going to keep talking, even though I know you're going to fade the sound down before the time I've reached the end of this sentence.
Wow, what were you trying to say?
I don't get a lot of buy-in from people about this topic anymore.
I'm sure there's plenty of GNR fans out there. Let us know if you like the old Guns N' Roses. Well, thanks for that. I've got a few recommendations. I'm going to recommend a biography. It's Nick Drake, The Life, and it's written by Richard Morton Jack, and it has the blessing of Nick's sister, Gabrielle, who was in the running to be Jo Grant. I think she got down to the last 3, so she was quite a famous actress back in the 70s and had a really good career, but it's a biography of her brother Nick, who was the super talented singer, songwriter, folk musician who made 3 albums in the 70s and very sadly succumbed to a very distressing bout of mental illness and took his own life because he kind of believed that all of his music was not really reaching anyone, and then a good 20-30 years later people can't get enough of it, and he's renowned as this really super talented and innovative musician, and it's a really interesting look at his life and debunks some of the stuff that's come out in previous books. So it's obviously not a laugh a minute, but if you're a fan of his music, it's a really interesting book to get your teeth into. And also, while I'm on, I am going to give a plug to some of the other Doctor Who podcasts that I've been whoring myself out on. So I've been on Doctor Who Gives a Flux with Mike, who's a lovely chap. And I've also been on Who's He with the amazing Phil Cannon. And where else have I been? Oh, goodness.
Have you been on Joe Ford?
I have been on Joe Ford.
Did he enjoy it?
I'm about to go on Joe Ford again. He obviously
Blimey.
liked it because he's asked me back again, yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. So, yes, thank you all for inviting me on, and I'm sure there's loads I've forgotten, but check them out. Tim, what would you like to recommend?
I've been working through DVDs that I've had for years that I've never taken the cellophane off and really should have watched.
Okay.
And the one I've enjoyed most is Soylent Green.
Oh.
Which is one of those things I probably just nod and pretend I've watched, but I've actually watched it, and I thought it was terrific, especially Edward G. Robinson.
Yeah.
I liked the theme. I liked hearing the famous quote at the end, quotation, I should say. Soylent Green is
Yes.
terrific
We'll never be able
stuff.
to watch Revelation of the Daleks the same way again, will you?
That's quite right. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I watched Logan's Run as well. Didn't enjoy it quite so much, but worth checking out for some fantastic haircuts.
I wonder where you're going with that, Tim. Jenny
So,
Agutter,
yes,
anyone? Anyway.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Lovely.
And they're excellent. Check out Soylent Green.
Yes, a bit of a classic. Tim, thank you so much for coming on. We've had so much fun having a chat
My
with you.
pleasure.
Is there anything you'd like to give a bit of a plug to while you're here? You have got a wonderful podcast all about the missing episodes.
You can check out my podcast. Ian won't, of course, because at the time of recording, the last one published was The Enemy of the World. And he said, I hate missing episodes, and I hate anyone who likes missing episodes. But I do a podcast about the missing episodes. And we give them a bit of a review. We try to figure out what they would have looked like, and we try to wonder whether there's any opportunity for them to return, or we tell the story of how they returned. So check that out. Just Google or Ask Jeeves Doctor Who The Missing Episodes podcast, and it's on all the usual places.
Yeah, or searchwise.net. To put it in a nutshell, Tim and his colleagues do an incredible amount of research, and they're real professionals when it comes to this game, as opposed to Ian and I, who just kind of pitch up and get someone good to come on as a guest and let them do all the heavy lifting.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, it's a great podcast. You really should check it out. So thank you, Tim, once again.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
And join us next time when we'll be taking a trip to the land of fiction. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.
You can recommend the Kashmir. No one's mentioned the Kashmir yet.
Is this another Canterbury thing?
It's another Canterbury thing.
Yeah, there we go.
Kashmir Tandoori has... No, it's the Raj venue that's gone.
Oh, God, don't say that.
Oof.
Most of my friends from uni are still there, and they still go to Kashmir every week.
Yeah.
I think they're awfully worldly.
There's a really weird one that's been there for ages called the Ancient Raj, and you go in there and it's all in the theme of the Raj, and while you're having a wee, you're surrounded by pictures of the Viceroy with all of his servants, and on the sound system they have very old people narrating how fondly they remember Imperial India. It is weird. It's really
sounds a bit
weird.
UKIP-y.
It is very
dear.
UKIP-y, yeah.
Oh, no.
It's very, very strange.
Oh no.
There you go.
Now that put me off my curry, that.
Yeah, I've not been back. Anyway.
It's probably for the best. Right,
Neither
shall
was
we-
anyone else from the sound of it.